The Star Wars novels provide that chance to follow the adventures through more than 100 novels. It's an investment that can keep you reading for years and years and years.
For the New Jedi Order,
in those story meetings, we tossed around a lot of ideas, and out of those ideas, I was hired to write an outline which we could submit to George Lucas, which we did, and he objected to some things and approved most of it.
the big ideas behind that series regarding some of the characters, we did have to have his permission to do certain things, some ideas he nixed right away.
This is a question about Labyrinth of Evil, which is the novel immediately before Revenge of the Sith.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious, what kind of material did Lucasfilm provide you to give you an ability to write that? Did you get a preview of the film or something?
Yeah, I had the script for the film, and I also had the ear of George Lucas on that one. So any time that I had a question about a character or I needed permission to take the story in a certain direction, I'd have that input from him.
When I was commissioned to do that book, I was communicating with George Lucas.
At that time, there was no background for Grievous. That originally was an important part of my being commissioned for that novel and creating a background for Grievous. I had George's input on that too, because I said I could take this in any number of ways. Is there anything that you were thinking about Grievous? He gave me a few things that allowed me to sort of expand on the character and give him a little bit of background.
I sat down and there was an email from Lucasfilm saying, would you like to do the backstory of Darth Plegus? And I was like thrilled because I had, they'd just been touched on in the films, but we didn't know anything about him.
What a beautiful book. With Darth Plegus, you got to have a lot of conversations about exactly how you were going to tie.
At the upper level, yeah, that was very rewarding.
Because I got Cloak of Deception, and then I was able to write Dark Lord and, one of the prequel tie-ins, and then Darth Plegus. I was able to kind of have a through story that I wanted to tell. I pitched a book called The Tao of the Force, which George shot down immediately. He said, I'm not turning the Force into a religion. So I don't want this kind of book. And it's funny because over the years, he's sort of backpedaled on that. And there's been plenty of books about the Force.
You were overseen by a group of people who make decisions regarding this big picture that I'm talking about. With Star Wars, you've got to jump through a lot of hoops. You've got to submit outlines beforehand. Those outlines have to be approved by several people. There's a lot of back and forth discussion that goes on. There's a lot of tweaking that goes on. And there's a lot of things that you have to adhere to that you don't find in some of the smaller franchises.
You have to understand the rules, and with Star Wars, it's pretty strict about where you can go and where you can't go. And what tone you can take, what tone you shouldn't take. I made many trips to first to Skywalker Ranch and then to Lucasfilm when they moved to the Presidio in San Francisco. And most of my contact with George was via email or through his one of his seconds at Lucasfilm. But yes, I sat in on a lot of story meetings, especially during New Jedi Order. I think for every book, I spent some time at Skywalker Ranch. I was out there with Matt when he met with George before he did the novelization. I got to sit down and ask him different questions about the film. So that was cool. I can't speak to the process for other writers. For me, it was always like I get an email from George or from one of George's lieutenants that would say, give us the backstory on the Trade Federation. And that would be it. Or give us the backstory on Plagueis. Or what is Patonemodia and how does that fit into the whole thing? And that would be it. Yeah. And then it would be up to me to find the story there. And one thing that we all had to do was we all had to write detailed outlines that were submitted to Lucasfilm. And then there was usually a little back and forth about the outline. But once you got approval for the outline, then you were free to just follow that and write your own book. There was always a lot of resource material available at Lucasfilm and people to speak to there if I had to know about a planet or know about the backstory on a character. But I was lucky. I didn't get a lot of pushback from. I was able to write the novels that I wanted to write. I've always been a real proponent for continuity. I try and just use anything. I feel like that it expands the franchise to just bring in lesser known characters and make it one unified universe.
A lot of this stuff is just in my head. I really did the bulk of my research when I was at first invited to kind of help structure the New Jedi Order series. I read every comic, every novel, every source book, essential guide, and made notes, and a lot of that stuff just is still with me, almost like a foreign language when you learn it as a kid. I mean, it's just in your head. But I did have to constantly check myself and open up different source books or open up novels and find out whether I was on the right track and I hadn't botched something. I really like to, I try my best to make it as realistic as possible. And I mean realistic within the franchise. I mean, I hope that like all of us who have been reading Star Wars for 20 years or whatever and know the movies really well can sort of read a novel in Star Wars and really feel like it's taking place in an alternate universe that we know really well. So I do try and draw on things that that have been used before, so that it really does seem like a real place. I don't want to constantly be making up new planets or making up new species. And also, I like to draw on characters who are interesting visually, so that they conjure images, so that the books tend to become very visual and almost film-like. I'll go back a lot of times to images in the films for just that reason. I'm not trying to cheapen it. I'm just trying to make it a real experience for the reader. For me, as a fan and as a reader, as someone who's invested a lot of time in Star Wars, I think that continuity is extremely important, because I think the more you can flesh out this universe in a very real way, the more rewarding the reading experience. From the very start, I felt that continuity had to be maintained.
From my earliest involvement with the franchise, going all the way back to 2000, there has always been sort of a form of the story group. I mean, we always used to meet editors and writers, and we'd trade ideas. It really hasn't changed much. I mean, the personnel have changed. There are more voices involved than there were, 15 years ago, but the process remains the same.
Do you approach it a little bit differently, knowing that it's going to be Legends instead of canon, or how does that work when you're working on these books?
That's another slightly heartbreaking element to all this, because you're pitched an idea for a book, or you pitch a book, and you think that that's going to be Creed. You think that's going to be canon, and it just doesn't work out that way. It gets overwritten, it gets changed. It's just weird to me that like Tarkin and Catalyst are now canon, where Plagueis and Cloak of Deception are not. Right. I don't know how to make that distinction.
We've asked this question to some of the other authors that we've talked to a while back when the Legends thing sort of happened. Yeah. How do you feel about the title Legends and kind of what happened with all of the novels?
For me, I can almost dismiss that Legends banner. I just have my own sense of the saga, the way it's played out, sort of almost like an alternative history. So all those stories are still in my head, and I think it's going to take more than a banner on a book to make me change my mind about what Tim Zahn did, or what Mike Stackpole did, or what any of us have done.
I think at this point I had my run, and I'm satisfied with that. I think I'd have a lot of catching up to do. I'm not sure. I don't want to be disparaging, but working with the Disney group was a little bit different than working with George and Skywalker. There were a lot more people weighing in on what they wanted from an author, and what how this story should be told. So I don't think I'd have the freedom that I had during, what I consider my my golden years. I think it would be a little different. So I'll leave that to somebody else.